How do you fight a battle that you just can't win? That's a question I have to answer every single day, because when I get up in the morning, there's one thing I'm absolutely certain about. I will still have Parkinson's disease. And I know my day will be filled with confrontations with the disease. This is one of my most persistent enemies. The common shirt button. If I try to put on my shirt in the morning before my meds have kicked in, it'll be as difficult for me to fasten these 12 buttons as it would be for you to button your shirt or blouse wearing gloves. And if I'm in a hurry or if I get frustrated, it gets harder. And the worst part is, I know that ultimately the buttons will prevail. If I live long enough, the day will come when I will be unable to button my own shirt. So what's the point? How do I fight a battle against something that I can't defeat? Let me tell you one of the first things I learned about Parkinson's disease. Shortly after I was diagnosed, I went to a symposium about the disease for laypersons. And that night when I got home, my wife, who was unable to attend the conference, said, "So, what'd you learn today?" I said, "Well, I learned it's not a good idea to get in a buffet line behind a person with Parkinson's disease." I was trying to be funny. I was trying to make light of the situation. But I later realized there were two simple truths in that statement. The first is, Parkinson's disease will change your life. It'll change the way you look at life. You can't ignore it. You must make adjustments. And the second is attitude. The way you decide to face your new reality is critical. Let me give you a quick example. When I joined the board of the National Parkinson Foundation Heartland, there were 3 other members of the board that also had Parkinson's disease. And so we decided we should have our own little support group. And I suggested that we call ourselves the Movers and Shakers. A friend of mine took exception to that name. She said, "You can't do that. It's too insensitive." I thought about that for a minute, and I said, "No, I think we can do that, and I think we should do that. It's all about attitude." That's when I realized that when I think about Parkinson's or talk about Parkinson's, I was starting from the wrong place. When I use the language of war, the analogies of war, doing battle, I'm left with 2 options. I'm going to win or I'm going to lose. And when I'm talking about a disease that is chronic, that's incurable, I really have no options. I know I cannot win. So it made sense for me to adopt a totally different language. And I found that language in a poem by the Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Mary Oliver. Oh, I just took my bookmark out. It's called The Journey. I'd like to read the first and last lines of that poem. The Journey. One day you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice. And the last line, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the one thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could. So the battle became a journey, and that made all the difference in the world. Let me tell you about my perceptions of that journey. If I were to ask each one of you to list 10 characteristics that you would use to describe yourself to another person, most of us would start in the same place, male or female, age, maybe our racial or ethnic background, our profession, our education, physical characteristics. These are the things that we would use to paint a picture of ourselves so that people would know what makes us tick. Now, for 1 million people in the United States like me, the phrase, "I have Parkinson's disease," would be near the top of that list. It's the elephant in the room for us. It won't let us forget that it's there. So when I get up in the morning, or when anyone with Parkinson's gets up in the morning, the medications you took yesterday are long gone. So you move slowly, tentatively. Maybe that's when the tremors start. Maybe you just have trouble getting your balance. For a lot of people, they didn't sleep that well the night before to begin with. And for some, just swallowing the pills that will give them temporary relief from some of the symptoms is hard or almost impossible. And getting dressed is an adventure. Just as the button is your worst enemy, all of a sudden the shoehorn is your very best friend. And there will be reminders throughout the day, especially the off times. You'll hear that from Parkinson's patients a lot, the off times. It's when the last pill you took is starting to wear off and the symptoms are starting to come back and it's not time for you to take the next pill yet. Every day is going to be different. And if you're stressed or you're tired, the medicines just don't work as well as they should. It's kind of like the ultimate bad hair day, only it's your whole body, and you just can't do a thing with it. They say Parkinson's makes your world smaller, and it stands to reason. Your movements are smaller, your sense of smell is smaller. Sometimes your voice gets smaller. Even your handwriting can be smaller. And because movement becomes difficult, or you're embarrassed by your lack of control, you become less adventurous and your world does become smaller. Because the Parkinson's is always there, either affecting what you're doing right now or it's lurking somewhere in the background, you have a tendency to forget that Parkinson's is not who you are, it is something that's happening to you. And one of the biggest challenges for us is to not let the disease define us. Now that's one thing I can happily say that I've dealt with successfully so far. I have not let the disease stop me from doing things that I want to do or things that are important for me. I still love to travel. I enjoy spending time with my grandkids, although I will admit that getting down on the floor and playing Barbies with a 6-year-old is a lot harder than it used to be. I get great satisfaction from my work with the church, the Parkinson Foundation, and other causes that are important to me. I still have make time for my own creative projects. I make sure every day I set aside some time to write. I actually get more exercise than I used to. And I treasure the time that I have with my family and friends. I make an effort to continue to learn and to develop new skills. There's a lot of different ways that people describe Parkinson's. It's a movement disorder. It's a chronic degenerative neurological condition. My definition is pretty simple. Over time, I will lose the ability to control my own body. And that's a scary thought. And it means that Parkinson's is not just my disease, it affects my whole family. And everyone that has Parkinson's it affects them a little bit differently. But there's one thing we all tend to have in common. We can tell you exactly when we were diagnosed. Friday, May 27th, 2005. That's when a neurologist told me, you have Parkinson's disease. And as you can imagine, I don't remember much he said after that. He did say two things that I remember. He said, you're not going to die from it, so try to relax and enjoy the rest of your life. And there are a lot of good medications available to help us treat the symptoms. I remember those, but they didn't mean much to me at the time. Frankly, I was scared. So I have a hint for you. If you're going to a neurologist for the first time and you're expecting bad news, don't go on Friday afternoon. And don't go on Friday afternoon before a holiday weekend. I had 3 days to worry about what I'd heard, and no one to talk to except my wife, who was just as worried or perhaps more so than I was. So I did exactly the wrong thing. I went on the internet. And I got more disease. I got more information than I could possibly absorb. Most of it was wrong, and by the time Tuesday morning rolled around, I was more confused and more scared than ever. But actually, I've been pretty fortunate for someone with Parkinson's disease. It's progressed rather slowly to this point. And the symptoms I had initially seemed almost inconsequential. You know, when I walked, I tended to drag my left foot a little bit, and my left arm didn't swing naturally. It just hung there. I had no idea what was wrong, but I had a feeling that maybe because it was just affecting my left side, it might be some kind of a stroke. But fortunately, my primary care doctor recognized those symptoms for what they were, and he got me to a neurologist. Now, a lot of doctors are not that familiar with Parkinson's, so the disease can go undiagnosed or misdiagnosed for a long period of time. Secondly, I was fortunate because I had access to a neurologist. If I lived in a rural community somewhere in the United States, I might be 2 hours from a neurologist or more. I might even be 2 hours or more from a doctor. The third way I've been fortunate is I live in a time when there are a lot of good medications for the treatment of the symptoms. Even though there's not a cure yet, getting the medications balanced and keeping them balanced is critically important as the disease develops. The medications, although do have side effects, as all medications do, and perhaps you've heard about that class of drugs that perhaps encourages compulsive behavior, compulsive gambling, compulsive shopping. You know, I kind of hoped I would get the compulsive sex fiend side effect, but it didn't happen. And I'm fortunate to be in this community where there are excellent support services. The University of Kansas Medical Center is one of 25 nationally recognized centers of excellence for the treatment and research in Parkinson's disease. And the local chapter of the National Parkinson Foundation is one of the most active in the country. And the information and services they provide enrich the quality of life for anybody with Parkinson's. But perhaps the thing I've been most fortunate about is that I have had the ongoing support of my family and friends. I want to clarify something I said a few minutes ago. When I said I have not let the disease keep me from doing things that I want to do, there's a kind of implied asterisk at the end of that statement. A disclaimer, if you will. I am not naive. I know what is ultimately ahead of me. I know that the disease will continue to progress, and that someday there will come a time when I will lose control. And no amount of exercise, no diet, no medication that we currently have will change that. So I need to be prepared for that eventuality. And I need to help my family prepare for that eventuality. But I can't let that ruin today for me. Those words from that neurologist come back to me. It's not going to kill you, so relax and try and enjoy the rest of your life. There's a huge difference between being prepared for the future and worrying so much about the future that it destroys your today. And it starts with attitude. And that's something I can control. There's a tendency of a lot of people with chronic diseases to retreat from the world. That's absolutely the wrong thing to do. And as a matter of fact, I can't think of any time when that's a good thing to do. So if you've been anyone newly diagnosed with Parkinson's, I'm going to share with you my suggestions. They're the suggestions that I give to myself every day, and I carry them with me in my billfold. Learn to say yes. Learn to say yes to the opportunities that will keep your world big. Learn to say yes to exercise, anything that keeps you moving. Stay active, stay involved. Say yes to things that will get you out of the house. Reach out, interact, stay interested, stay interesting, and make yes the default setting for your response mechanism. And above all, don't let the day end without a reason to get out of bed in the morning. It can be something like schedule lunch with a friend, plan to Skype with your grandkids, or something just as simple as tomorrow morning I'm going to stay in my pajamas, take a second cup of coffee, and do the crossword puzzle. My criteria is if it makes you smile when you think about it, it's a good choice. So I've reached a point where when I read an obituary that says he lost his courageous battle with Parkinson's disease, I get a little upset, frankly, because we know that's a battle you can't win. So when my obituary is written, I want it to say, he lived with Parkinson's. Thank you for listening.